Intensive airstrikes pounding Iran. U.S. forces escalating military operations, striking by night and by day as both sides battle for control over the Strait of Hormuz. And welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Dana Perino.
Morning to you. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning at home. CENTCOM enforcing a naval blockade yet again against Iran, disabling a tanker that was sailing toward Karg Island, Iran's main oil terminal, and also hitting targets along the coast to further try and degrade Iran's ability to threaten any sort of traffic that moves through the Strait of Hormuz.
And Senator Tom Cotton will join us on the Mideast escalation in a moment. First, senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy live on the North Lawn with an update for us. Hi, Peter. Good morning.
Dana, good morning. The U.S. shot some HELLFIRE missiles into the smokestack of a commercial vessel in the Strait of Hormuz that was ignoring military commands to steer clear of an Iranian port. President Trump is very serious about enforcing this naval blockade as he tries to figure out what to do next.
The Islamic Republic of Iran is not happy right now. They want to settle so badly. They don't like what we're doing. And they do want to settle. We'll find out whether or not we settle with them or we just finish it off.
The Iranians did something that President Trump views as a goodwill gesture, letting an American woman named Dina Karari, stuck there since 2024, go. Her lawyer says while subject to a coercive exit ban, she was interrogated dozens of times by Iran's notorious Ministry of Intelligence and Security, and although never physically detained, she suffered enormous physical and psychological hardship. Is this American woman's release going to be enough to prevent a renewed bombing campaign? Don't know. But we do know why the president has ruled out sending in ground troops to Iran.
Unless the people on the ground themselves want to accomplish that outcome. Now, we're not going to send the troops in regardless, but to propose sending in the troops, you're basically saying that the U.S. military should do the job for the Iranian people. We're not in that business anymore. We're just not.
President Trump told our Fox Business colleague Edward Lawrence yesterday that because the IRGC is not negotiating, he is considering just wiping out the IRGC the same way that a couple years ago he wiped out ISIS. Dana.
All right, Peter Doocy, thank you so much.
So,
Bill?
Dana, on the board here, we show you a number of maps. Peter was talking about the blockade. It's now back into effect. And that runs essentially, roughly speaking, from the coast of Oman right here to the border between Iran and Pakistan. You see all this in red? That's the shoreline, the Persian Gulf, into Gulf of Oman. If you were to measure that, that's about 950 to 1,000 miles. It is no small piece of property. Over here, here's the reported strikes on behalf of the U.S. over the past 24 hours, give or take, and a lot of those happening right along here, Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf. Of note here, this is the town of Bampur. We talked about this yesterday. Apparently, an army barracks was hit in Iran. About 7 Iranian soldiers were killed, and about more than 200 were injured after that U.S. strike there. Now, this is what the Iranians have done in return. Everything on the map here you see in yellow, all those yellow dots, that's where the U.S. military has installations, like in Bahrain with the 5th Fleet, or in Kuwait with the U.S. Army. Also back here in north-central Iraq, a few areas targeted as well, and an air base here in Jordan also. Based on the reporting we're getting, however, the Iranian strikes have not been successful. Swing on back here, and there's a lot on this graphic, I get it. But what we want to show you over the past 9 days is the amount of military activity the U.S. has undergone in Iran. Back on July 7th, 80 Iranian targets. On the 8th of July, 90 Iranian targets. Then you still have dozens of targets on Sunday as well. Come up here to Monday, you got a 5-hour strike wave. Then on Tuesday, a 7-hour strike wave. So all this shows you the decision the Pentagon and the Commander-in-Chief, President Trump, are making now about ramping up this effort against Iran to try and force them back to the table of negotiations. We'll see if that works. Dana, back to you.
More on this with Senator Tom Cotton. He's chairman of the Intelligence Committee. 2 things for you to listen to. First is from an Iranian resident saying this about the United States and Israel.
Iran should close the strait so that Israel and the United States are put in their place and know that Iran is powerful, stands by its strength, and stands by its faith. We will stand to the last drop of our blood. The United States will soon be destroyed.
And the vice president also made some comments yesterday. They're getting some attention, talking about Israel and the ceasefire. Watch here.
we know that the negotiation strategy that the president has asked us to pursue, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there have been people within the Israeli government who are trying to actually shift us away from that policy because they want to continue the military campaign.
And since you are the chairman of the Senate Intel Committee, I thought I would ask you if you can back that up or if you've heard about that in terms of Israel.
No, Dana, I'm not aware of any intelligence about a secret influence operation to try to change American public opinion on negotiating under the Memorandum of Understanding. To the extent American public opinion has changed, I suspect it's because of what Donald Trump says, that Iran's leaders are revolutionary fanatics, they're scum, they're sick, they're evil, and last week they started randomly shooting up ships and their neighbors again. These are not people that are serious about making a deal. They've never been serious about making a deal. As President Trump has said, the last couple of weeks have revealed that. That's why we put the blockade back in place. We put sanctions in place. We're hitting the military targets in southern Iran that allowed them to harass the Strait of Hormuz. I commend the president for those actions. I think we should just declare that we're going to keep the strait open through the southern channel, assist ships coming through, help protect them from harassing Iranian strikes, and finish the job of putting Iran's military in a position where it can't continue to consistently harass the strait. That's what the victory would look like here, and we're not that far away from it.
How do we know that?
Well, Bill, we've been able to get several million barrels of oil a day through the strait going back into May, as the president has revealed. Oftentimes that happened during hours of darkness. It can happen during hours of daylight as well. That's the briefings that we've received from Central Command. Iran will always have the ability to potentially harass with, say, small drones or rockets the ships going through the strait, but we have the ability with our partners to help protect those ships coming through the strait, to make sure that Americans are not paying higher gas and diesel prices. We also can enforce that blockade, as we did for a couple months, that brings Iran's economy to its knees. And as for the tape about the Iranian national, that's not what we saw from millions of Iranians in January who hate the revolutionary fanatics that have been oppressing them for 47 years, who are out in the streets protesting against the leaders of Iran.
One of the things that the vice president said yesterday also was that he welcomes the people of Iran to rise up against their government. I'm curious if you have any information more about, is that even possible? Is there a bubbling of that? Is there something happening within Iran that we're not privy to?
Well, Dana, I don't want to reveal any kind of classified information, but I can just tell you that we don't really need classified information. We've seen over time the Iranian people rebelling against this oppressive, tyrannical regime. Saw it most recently in January, saw it in the first Trump administration, we saw it in 2009 when the largest protests to that point ever were simply abandoned by the Obama administration. It's very clear that the Iranian people are sick of living under this revolutionary regime. They'd like a government that simply tends to their needs and acts like a normal nation, that doesn't try to export revolutionary violence throughout the Middle East and against the United States.
Sir, one last thing here, and this really goes to your wheelhouse in the U.S. Senate. Wall Street Journal editorial board, Democrats blockade U.S. national security. Chuck Schumer's Senate minority is helping Iran and other adversaries by obstructing vital defense and intelligence bills. Where does that stand now? And how closely are the American people following this story that could cripple any sort of U.S. military effort against Iran, sir?
Yeah, Bill, the Democrats do have a blockade on our national security in the United States Senate. Just this week, they blocked the annual defense bill. That blocks my committee's annual legislation, the intelligence bill. They've been blocking the defense spending bill. They're blocking a supplemental defense spending bill to replenish our stockpiles. They're also blocking the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act reauthorization. All of that is because they're putting their own political hostility to Donald Trump ahead of national security. These are bills that traditionally, Bill, pass with 60, 70, even 80 votes in the United States Senate. But because they are so stubbornly opposed to anything that Donald Trump proposes, they're putting our troops at risk, they're putting our nation at risk.
Can I just press you on FISA just a little bit? Because Secretary Rubio just gave a speech an hour ago talking about far-left terrorism, and he has 60 nations there saying we all have to work together because this is coming to a capital city near you, and it's a big problem and it's growing. How big a concern do you have about FISA being dark for almost a month?
Well, I'm very concerned about it, Dana. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, Section 702, is probably the single best source we have, not just for threats from left-wing terrorists or al-Qaeda, but also China and Russia. It's also helped us save American troops that have been in harm's way. And now for more than a month, that law has lapsed. So the Democrats were prepared to vote on it. They decided against it last month because they didn't like who Donald Trump appointed to fill a job that doesn't really have much to do with Section 702 on a part-time basis. They're really just manufacturing reasons to vote against every vital national security law. And to Bill, to your point, maybe the American people don't follow the ins and outs of these legislative debates, but there's no question the American people know the Democratic Party is not serious about keeping our nation safe, and frankly, they haven't been for a very long time.
Senator, thank you for your time. Just looking at Marco Rubio from the Department of State last hour. Tom Cotton, thanks for coming on. We'll follow it every hour. Thank you. Sir.
Thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.